So today's guest is Deanna Jones. Not only is she a business leader in the tech world, she's been at Cisco Systems for nearly 25 years, but she's a speaker and a consultant in the diversity space. She's vice president of Harmony, which is the North Carolina LGBT plus Allied Chamber of Commerce. And here's a quote she shared with me before the interview, quote, "I built an entire life around a certain identity that didn't belong to me. At the late age of 54, I decided to finally stop trading in attachment for authenticity and become the person I know myself to be." Wow, that's a really strong quote, Deanna. So welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I did not make this a long intro because I really want you to tell your story. This is such an embodiment of what this podcast is about, which is about taking risks, making a change, transforming your life. And that's exactly what you've done. So walk us through, if you will, your background and, where you are today and how you got there.
Okay. Well, I had to go to my wife, now ex-wife, about 6 years ago and say, I'm not the person you think I am. I have felt like I am in the wrong body for as long as I can remember. And if you want to set off a nuclear bomb in your family, that's the type of thing you say. There was debris everywhere. And before I knew it, I was divorced and living in a bachelorette apartment. And that's not nearly as sexy as it sounds. I was all alone and I was crushed. And I wondered how I could lose so much just by being myself. And I knew that my true self had never fully been revealed because I have felt this way since I was 4 years old.
So you were born male.
I was born male. I was assigned the male identity at birth.
And you're saying 4 years old. So talk to us about that. How did you know or feel that something wasn't right?
Well, after the doctor gave me the assignation of male, 1,000 decisions were then made for me. Decisions that were no longer mine. Would I play sports? Would I fight? Would I be rough? Would I try and be bossy? Would I be able to take up a lot of space? And so many of those things I didn't feel comfortable with.
The cultural, societal norms.
Yes.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, so in the
Born
city
and raised
or
there, just outside of the
Okay.
city. We lived near Nations Ford Road, and that was where I grew up. And I grew up in a very traditional family.
and what year were you born? Because you're 59 now.
64.
So this was a time when it wouldn't have been something you could have even expressed if you
No.
understood it.
Right. And I had no idea where this came from. It was not taught to me at school. This is the 70s, then I'm entering first grade, second grade, all through the 70s. My sisters never forced me to dress up. They never dressed me up. I didn't see a movie about this. There was no exposure to this desire to be in a woman's body or to be able to express my feminine self. 4 years old, I can remember wanting to wear my sister's clothes. And as I got older, I actually went to the hamper, locked the bathroom door, and I'd put on my sister's clothes, and I'd look in the mirror and I saw this beautiful girl. I had no one to tell this to because I thought it was such a deviant thing about me because nobody else I knew felt this way. Just to give you an analogy, I felt like everybody around me was drinking ice water and I was drinking something really sour. Nothing ever fit. I was constantly told, you smile too much, you're acting
Feminine.
girly, you're acting feminine.
Did you ever think for a minute, because I think maybe back then you might have learned more about what it meant to be gay. So did you think, oh, well, maybe I'm gay, but then that was confusing because you liked girls, you liked
I
women.
loved girls. As a matter of fact, I always thought two things when I looked at a girl. I thought, she's beautiful. I'd really like to be with her. And then the second thing was, I'd like to be her. I'd like to wear what she's wearing. I'd like to act like she is acting, because it wasn't just about clothes.
Right.
Clothes were my gateway to the person I wanted to be, but I wanted to be feminine, and I had to continually tamp that down, because if you try and go outside the norms for your gender, you are quickly corrected. You learn that there are penalties. You will be called every name you can be in the book. I don't even have to go over those. But yes, I was called gay. I was called a fag. I was called femwad. There were so many insults that were hurled at me. And all I was doing was just being myself. But
So what did you ever, I mean, when was the first time, and whether you saw it in a movie or you talked to somebody, that you went, "Oh my gosh, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm feeling." And that where you understood it.
not until I was 50 did I fully understand it. I remember watching a movie about Renee Richards, the tennis player, and thinking, well, that seems crazy. I'm not like that. And again, by this time, I was probably in my 20s when I saw that. I have that autocorrect going on in my brain. No, you're not that way. You can't be that way. And I was the firstborn son to my parents. I had two older sisters, and my dad put so much emphasis on being the man, being the macho man, like Tom Selleck. I can remember how much he liked Tom Selleck. Like, that's the kind of man you need to be. But inside, that wasn't what I felt at
Right. And
all.
so there was this big disconnect,
There was a huge
and I'm
disconnect
sure
throughout
it
my whole
caused
life.
depression, anxiety, all sorts of
Right.
issues. So,
Yes.
so talk about the decision to then get married and have kids. I mean, I guess that was part of the trajectory of, I want to be quote unquote normal. I don't want to be different. I don't know what this is, but I'm going to go the path.
Yeah. That's a very good question, Amanda. I know that I would frequently buy clothes and put them on in hidden spaces. I cannot tell you how many times I took those clothes and burned them, or I threw them away, and it never went away. So I thought, what is the best way I can be cured? It's to marry a woman, it's to start having kids. So I did. I got married to the woman that I love, and she loved me. We were going to spend the rest of our lives together. I had three beautiful children. I had a daughter, and then a son, and then another daughter. We did in vitro because it took us a long time to have kids. And I thought it was the most wonderful thing in the world to have this family. And it truly was the most wonderful thing. And I appreciated it every single day. I thought that I was the luckiest man. But again, it didn't go away. It stayed hidden. I never stopped trying to express myself in a feminine way. But now I'm starting to use alcohol more to do it. I'm overeating. And I'm going through my life like almost an observer, looking at myself, thinking, yes, you're doing all the things they told you to do as a man, but you're not happy. And I can remember thinking, if somebody came to me and said, we're going to cut off three of your fingers and this is all going to go away, I would say, take my fingers, please. But this burden became so much that I could not even function. I was in a crawl space underneath my house with a bag of clothes, trying to be the person that I wanted to be, because it had to come out. And this is something that you learn as a transgender person. It does not go away. It will never go away. It's always going to be there. And I have talked to a lot of transgender women and men, and they all have the same experience of it starting young. And some of the older women decided not to transition because the cost was too great.
And so this transition that you made was at 54.
It was about at 54.
Okay.
My ex-wife finally found an article of clothing, and at first of course, like most women, she'd say, "You're having an affair." And I said, "No, I'm not. That's mine." And I had to explain to her that I have felt this way my whole life and I've never been able to get rid of it. I mean, if there had been anything for me to get rid of it, of course I would have done it. Because my fear was that if anyone found out about this, I would lose everything. I would lose a job, I'd lose my family, I'd lose any respect I had in the community. And so that fear just kept me living in that life miserable.
And it's a good reminder to people that this is not a choice. That
It is
this
not a
was a very
choice.
powerful
Yes.
feeling that you had your whole life.
Yes.
So it didn't go well with your wife.
It didn't go well. And I want to just go back to that, what you had just said. It wasn't a choice. And there are studies that have been done. And of course, they're not, you don't ever really hear about them. But, you know, the genitalia is formed in the first 6 months of a pregnancy. And the latter half of a pregnancy is where the hormones are released in the brain that create different identities. And you cannot get enough T, or you cannot get enough testosterone or estrogen, and it can affect your brain identity. I cannot say this for everybody. All I know is it was true. It was true for me that I always had felt this way. So finally, to go back to your question, I had to tell her this is how I feel. And at first, I think she wanted to think of me as maybe non-binary because that was a little safer. If I were gender fluid, or maybe I just like to do this every now and then. And I tried that for a while, but I'm not that way. I'm firmly in the binary as
Sure.
a woman. Now, there are lots of people that are gender fluid and non-binary, and I respect them just as much. No one has a better experience, or there's no ranking. But for me, I had to express myself as the woman that I knew I was.
And your children were young.
My children were young.
They're teenagers now, but they
Yes.
were much younger. And so that's been difficult for you.
It's been very hard for me. There were a lot of tears, but we worked out an agreement that I could see them on the weekends. However, my wife was very angry, and she used to say to me, you know, that I robbed her of our old age together, which I do understand. And for her, she did not want to be a lesbian, and she had that choice to make. And I had to accept that, just as she had to accept the person that I was. I am estranged from my kids now. I've not seen my son in 3 years and my other two daughters in a year and a half. There's still a lot of hurt feelings. There's still a lot of anger. I know I made mistakes along the way. I wanted people to catch up to me as fast as I was going, but other people couldn't. I have 3 nephews that I haven't seen since I transitioned. Most of my family has abandoned me.
I was going to say, what about your parents? Are they still living?
My dad has died, so he died before I transitioned. And the beautiful story is that my mom, she's in assisted living, and she fully accepts me. As a matter of fact, she takes me around the assisted living home and says, "This is my 3rd daughter, Deanna." And we have a great relationship, and I truly do enjoy seeing her. My 2 sisters still don't quite understand. I've tried to explain to them, but it's very hard to explain this to other people. One of the things I do in my talks is I ask a question. If you were given $1 million, would you change your gender? And Amanda, only once can I remember one woman saying she would, but that was so she could pay for her kids to go to college. I know, that's a mom.
Right.
But it's amazing when anybody starts to think about, I don't want to change my gender. I love who I am. But every day of my life, until I transitioned, I had to make that bargain. Only I didn't get $1 million. I did have everything. I had the family. I had the nice house. We lived actually in Cary and went on nice vacations. But always in my mind, it was thinking, I'm not living the gender that I'm supposed to be.
You know, and I think that you bring up a good point that most of us who are assigned a gender and are happy with our gender would never change our gender. We
Yeah.
wouldn't make that choice, right?
Right.
And, you know, I love being a woman. I'm proud to be a woman. And sometimes I almost feel like we're not even allowed to say that anymore, that
Yeah.
there's a feeling of, that no, we're everything. We're so many different things. But you can't be proud to be a woman. So I understand what that feels like to be a woman and to want to be proud to be a woman. So talk to me about how this affected you professionally, because you're still in the same company that you were with, and how did you go about making the transition with your colleagues, with your managers?
Well, when we are in transgender support groups, there's always talk of loss. And I told you about the loss of my family. I was very fortunate and privileged to work for a California company, Cisco Systems, which has their second largest headquarters that's here in RTP. And they were fantastic. They were very good. Yes, there were a few slip ups. I can remember when we got the best place to work, it said, "Congratulations, David." And it had a picture of Deanna, and they were very apologetic, but they're always going to be. I don't get upset at those.
Because they're not personal.
They're not personal.
Trying
That's
to,
right.
to hurt. So did you, I mean,
But it was wonderful.
literally, did you go and meet with the manager and say, "Hey, I just need to tell you that
I
this is
did.
what's going to happen, and tomorrow Deanna's coming to work"?
Yes, I did. And my manager was very understanding, like, whatever you need, it's
That's amazing.
okay. Again, it was hard for a lot of people who had known David. I know most people don't like to use their previous name, but it's fine for me. And everybody gets to make that choice. But I was David at Cisco for 19 years, 19 or 20 years. And everybody knew me as that. But few people came up to me after I transitioned and said, Deanna, I always felt like there was something about you that just seemed off. And nearly 100% of the people have said, you are so different now. And I am, because as David, I was not a productive employee.
Yeah.
I hid. I stayed down on my cube. I was almost like the guy from Office Space. And I never volunteered for anything. And now that I get to be myself, I can't even get out there enough to tell my story.
Right.
Because it's amazing, the freedom. And that's why I feel like sometimes I'm 22 years old and just
You're
starting out.
your life
Yes,
out. So
yes.
when you meet new people,
Yes.
is this something that comes up in conversation, or do you just kind of wait and see what happens? If it's the right space to talk about it, if it's not, you don't.
Pretty much when I am just out talking to people, most people, I mean, now it seems like everybody correctly genders me.
Right.
There are times I'm sure I might be passing. A lot of it to me is the attitude and how I carry myself, which is very secure.
Sure.
It doesn't usually come up except in some of the places that I'm in. For instance, I'm the vice president of Harmony LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. And of course it comes up in
Right.
that. And when I go out and I speak to companies, I'll tell them my story. I don't believe in just giving an outline of slides, and not that there's anything wrong with gingerbread man, that's so frequently used, but I tell the story on a personal level. And if most people would not just bring this up, they would just treat me as I am. But if it does come up, I tell them this was my story. And the reason I like doing that is because right now there's so many misperceptions out there about us.
Sure.
When I read the North Carolina bill, the proposed bill, it said that a majority of people detransition, and that's just false.
Yeah.
It's not true. There's no scientific study to show that. There's maybe 4 to 6%, and half of them will go back to where they transition to. Another thing that's a myth is that it's a social contagion. I was 4 years old. Sorry if I keep hitting this.
No, it's okay.
I was 4 years
you knew from
old.
a very young age.
I mean,
What do you like about being a woman?
I love everything about it. I love the way I get to interact with the world. I love to move through the world with femininity. I love that it fits myself. I coached T-ball for 17 seasons. My kids, they aged out of it. That was okay as David, but as the person I truly am, excuse me, I feel so much better just doing any job that I do, whether it's coaching T-ball, talking to people. I love that I don't have a secret anymore. That's one of the best things. I don't have to carry this secret. I get to wear whatever I want to wear. And I'll just tell you, I don't wear pants very much.
Okay.
Because I had to do that for 50 something
a
years.
long time, you didn't have a lot of choice. So now you have choice.
Excuse me, that's true. And that's a difference. You know, a lot of times, you heard tomboys, that's okay. It's okay. I had a sister that was a tomboy, but I couldn't be a sissy. There was no way that, I could borrow from the female side
And walk in the world that way.
and walk in the world that way. But now I get to walk in the world the way I want to. I like where my voice is. I like my mannerisms. I also like looking at men and recognizing some of those things I was always trying to be. Like, for instance, men will try many times, and I'm watching them, take up as much space as they can in a room. And I remember trying to think I had to do that.
Right now, you don't have to do it anymore.
I don't have to do it.
Yeah, I don't mow the lawn, and I never have, or change the oil in my car. And my husband has zero idea what we buy at the grocery store.
That's right.
Yeah, send him to the grocery store. He just gets milk. I'm like,
Yeah.
really? Because we had a list, and
Yeah.
we're just getting milk. But
Just
no, and I agree with you. I mean, we talk a lot about being a woman. Obviously, that's what the show is about, and how proud I am to stand on the shoulders of my mother and my grandmother and all the women that came before me. And so, it's something to celebrate, right?
It is.
To feel, and the transition's different for everyone. We talked a little bit about off camera. Not everybody has the money to make a full transition. It is what it is. And
Yes,
but
and
yet,
in that way, I was very privileged,
Yeah.
and I recognize that because Cisco did pay for that. And you're right. There's a lot of people. If you go to a transgender support meeting, the stories can be horrendous.
of people who tried to,
Who have tried and lost their jobs
Yeah.
and had no income.
and I guess you probably mentor a lot of people. I would imagine, especially with the chamber. I would
Yes.
imagine.
Yes. One of the best things I heard was, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to transition or not. And then watching you, I discovered that there could be this other life
Right.
that I'm not living. And if I can do that just one time, it's worth it. Mainly, I go out and talk about this because I want to do away with the myths that are surrounding this. After I will tell my story, people do come up to me and say, but I keep hearing it's a social contagion. And I always get asked the question, you have regrets? And I go, no, I don't have any regrets. I lost everything in my family. But Amanda, I would have been dead in my 60s. My lifestyle was just awful because I was trying to, I was trying to bury this, and it wasn't a shovel I was using. It was alcohol, unhealthy lifestyle, depression. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, so many things. And I had so many bad habits. And that was just because I was kept trying to push this down. But there comes a point in your life when you can't push anymore. If you crawl into a crawl space, you eventually have to crawl out or just be buried there. And I knew I didn't want to. I thought for my kids, they'd rather have a live dad than a dead one.
And so now I'm imagining your hope for the future is some understanding eventually from your kids as they grow older.
Yes.
And maybe learn more about your situation and maybe come to some understanding where you could have a relationship again.
I hope that. I pray for that. I really do. I miss my kids so much. And not seeing them has been the most painful thing I've ever had to go through. I never even thought this would be so painful. I still don't regret it, but it's the worst pain I went through. And I separated, and my wife quickly divorced me. And it was 2019, so COVID hit, and I'm all alone. And I remember just being sad because, in the mornings, my kids would come in the room and jump on the bed and say, "Pancakes, Daddy." And, I didn't have that anymore. And it's a huge cost. And I'm sad about it every day. And I hope there's some future path where this group of people won't be so angry at me and can just understand that I no longer had a choice. I can remember telling my daughter that I remember we were in a restaurant and I looked at all the dads that were with the families and I said, I wish I could just be like that. And my daughter looks at me and says, I do too. And I understand that.
Yeah.
She lost a dad in a way. I mean, they could still call me dad, but I understood that.
Sure.
I really did and I told her, I said, I'm very, very sorry, but this is something that I could no longer bury anymore. And I'm glad I didn't. I'm living, in a lot of ways, I'm living this amazing life. The good news, I'm getting married next month, actually, in Duke Chapel.
Wow.
A nurse. Her name is Amy, and we love each other so much. And I've never had unconditional love like she gives me. And I cannot wait
How
to
did
walk
you
down
meet?
the aisle. We met at one of meetups. I discovered
Okay.
once COVID's finally started dying down, I got to get out there. I got to get out there. So it was
Sure.
through a meetup, and we just fell in love. And she is the kindest. She's Filipino, and something I've learned about different cultures is how free they are to love each other. I mean, I was raised as a WASP, and a lot of that is at arm's length. For instance, I never ever crawled in my mother's bed. That was just forbidden. And her kids will just jump in the bed with her and go to sleep. One of them's 21 and the other one's 16. And it's just the love
Closeness, yeah.
is over everything else. And yeah, it's been amazing to watch. But just to let you know, this time when I walk down the aisle, I'm wearing what I want to wear.
There you go. You will not be wearing a tuxedo.
I will not be wearing a
not be
tuxedo.
wearing a
Yes,
tuxedo.
I'm excited.
Deanna, you are such an inspiration, and thank you for sharing
Sure.
your story, because my hope is that other people will hear it.
Yes.
And if they're in a dark place and feel like they're different and they're not being who they want to be, hopefully they can draw from your story and realize that there is another path, right?
Yes.
And I
There is.
also really, really hope, and I honestly believe that your children will eventually see you in a different light and
I hope so.
and connect with you, because I think that that's really
Thank you.
important to all of you,
Yes.
for all of you.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I do want to add, I'm not here to take away anything from women or anyone else. I just want to be included. I think we all get to define what a woman is for ourselves because we're all very different. People ask me that all the time, like, well, what is a woman? And it's almost accusatory, but I don't think that that word can encompass the experiences of all women.
Everyone's different.
Everyone is
Absolutely.
different.
It's not a one size fits all.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly.
No, but
And,
everybody has a story,
Yeah.
right? Everybody has a story of how they got here.
And that's why I love what you're doing, because the more stories we hear, the more we understand each other.
Sure.
And I teach that some as well, as like telling stories in your presentations, because if you tell us a story about yourself, we'll learn something that we never even imagine. Like,
Or
oh
maybe
gosh.
didn't even know we needed to know.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
there's a lot out there. Well, your story is one of a kind,
Yeah.
and I do appreciate you sharing it.
Thank
And
you.
you're an inspiration, and I just hope for good things for
I
you
do too.
going forward. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.